So one of the interesting things about Pragmata is, in spite of its extended development cycle, in spite of all the hype around it, in spite of it being a Capcom game, mysteriously, it's not getting that high of Metacritic scores. It's at like 85 right now. It's nowhere near what Requiem was. It's nowhere near the highest scoring game of the year, Pokapia. You know, it's kind of average, okay? And I would argue that's like way higher than it should deserve, but it's average. And the reason it's average is because this is a game that was supposed to be a big new IP for PlayStation. It was supposed to be a system seller. It was supposed to be the reason to get the PlayStation 5. And out of nowhere, Capcom bent the knee and decided to release the game on Switch 2. And I don't know why they would do this. I was very, very surprised when this happened, because I was certain they would do that thing they always do where they pretended that the Nintendo console couldn't run the game. But no, they got this and Requiem out like very quickly and gave us Monster Hunter Stories 3 to boot. Like, Capcom is probably one of the best third-party Nintendo Switch supporters right now, with games like Street Fighter 6 coming out, constantly getting updates, being the best fighting game on Switch 2, like being reasonably supported. Like, again, they've been doing a really good job lately. So I'm very, 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 very confused about like what's been happening behind the scenes. What's been happening with Capcom, with what's been happening with Nintendo, and what's been happening with Sony. Because as we know, the traditional thing that happens when it comes to these Capcom Nintendo exclusives is that the gaming industry comes out and they try to bury them. This is what happened with RE4. Is that initially the game was coming out for the GameCube. Everyone said it was going to fail. Everyone said it sucked. Everyone said they didn't want to play it on a purple lunchbox. You know, the game comes out. It's an all-time classic. And it's not until it gets ported to PS2 where the industry finally started to like come around and acknowledge it as a masterpiece. In fact, these days, most people will try and tell you it's a PS2 game when in fact it was developed exclusively for GameCube, and that was by far the best version of the game. So, again, we see where the industry is coming from. We see what they've established. We've seen what they do. And to a certain extent, they're doing it with Pragmata. Because this game launched day and date on Nintendo Switch 2, that has automatically disqualified it from like gaming awards. It's disqualified it from 10 out of 10s. It's disqualified it from like the typical hype cycle that we see regarding most AAA games. Right now, the main discussion around the game is whether or not it's pedophilic. It is. And, not necessarily about its actual quality, because anybody who plays this game realizes very quickly that it's very poorly put together. It's not all that interesting. It's not all that fun to play, which is pretty typical for a PlayStation game. But when you put it up against, like, Nintendo games, like, Tamagotchi Life, what you get is a much lesser experience. I can't put down Tamagotchi Life right now, and right now I can't even be bothered to pick up Pragmata. I don't even want to play it again, honestly. Like, I'm probably going to keep playing it so I can talk about this more in depth and talk about, like, how the game failed and, like, why PlayStation is doomed and how this is, like, the end result of, like, the Last of Us strategy of just getting people, like, invested by throwing a little girl in their face. This is a very interesting game because, like, it's been such a flop compared to The Last of Us. Like, I would argue it is better than The Last of Us, because at the very least it does have level design, it does have enemies, it does have unique mechanics, it tries to innovate as an actual game. It's a way better game than The Last of Us. But the simple fact of the matter is, The Last of Us was one of the worst things to happen to gaming ever, in the sense where game journals rallied to hype this game up, to glaze it, because it was a PlayStation exclusive, because it was a movie game, because it pushed their political agenda. Like, game journals promoted it for that reason. And Capcom saw this with Pragmata, and they were just like, okay, let's do the same thing. And so they did it, and, like, nobody cares. Because people didn't like The Last of Us for any real reason. Okay? People didn't play the game and thought it was a masterpiece. People thought it was a masterpiece because game journos told them to, because they were told that PlayStation had the best exclusives for a mature adult audience, right? That's why The Last of Us was glazed so much, is that, like, it wasn't because it was such a good game, it was entirely because like the industry had gaslit people into thinking this was some like monumental success story for them. And Pragmata is interesting because if The Last of Us was the beginning of that trend, it feels like Pragmata is like the end of it. Where Pragmata is doing the same kind of thing, it's pandering to the same kind of people, it's going through like the same motions, it's like trying the same tactics, and yet they're just not working. Because like the Last of Us formula is played out, and you can argue Pragmata is technically better with like the increased mechanics, with the sci-fi setting, with like the different tone, with like the increased interactivity between the characters, like the things you can do. Like, you know, the Pragmata is a better game by far, but like when you compare it to games like say Breath of the Wild or like Mario Odyssey or Splatoon 2, like what you see is just this huge gap in quality between like a better PlayStation game versus like what Nintendo is doing 10 years ago. Okay, like Pragmata is getting mogged by like Tamagotchi Life. Okay, and I think that's something that like a lot of people didn't really expect going into this. But like the simple fact of the matter is Tamagotchi Life is a huge success and is a huge like indication of just how much more successful and popular Nintendo games are than the competition. While Pragmata, this game that had a ton of resources poured into it, you know, to appease pedophiles, to be like the next Last of Us, like this game comes out and it's just a wet fart. Like nobody cares about it. Like it's going to sell like, you know, based on its hype alone. But the simple fact of the matter is this was supposed to be the biggest game on PlayStation at one point. And the simple fact of the matter is it's out now, and the reality is just not living up to the fantasy, honestly. It's kind of a precursor, I think, as to what's going to happen to Grand Theft Auto 6, in which the endless delays, like the hype, they're just going to result in this backlash, this quiet, like, silence, in which, like, people just aren't really willing to acknowledge that, like, Pragmata, like, the game just isn't living up to expectations. And that's kind of the process we're going through now. Right, like once this game was confirmed to be coming to Switch 2, like the masses just lost all interest in it. They had no reason to glaze this game, and as a result of that, like nobody's really talking about it right now. Like even as a disappointment, and that's the big thing about this is that it's worse for a game to come out and be a disappointment than for it to come out and like nobody be talking about it at all. Because I think if the game was disappointing, you would have people like coming out and defending it eventually for the stuff it does do well. You know, the way things are going now, like nobody's going to remember like Pragmata by next year. Okay? Like the big new AAA Capcom game is a complete flop, and nobody seems willing to acknowledge it.